Her fiancé betrayed her, but his gentle billionaire friend fell deeply in love with her. She arrived at the Hilton estate expecting to celebrate her future as Mrs. Michael Hilton. Instead, she found her fiancé with another woman in the garden, surrounded by guests who pretended not to notice. But when his quiet billionaire friend offered her a handkerchief and a way out, neither expected that one act of decency would unravel everything they thought they knew about love. You are welcome to my YouTube channel. If you love deep stories that hit the heart and keep you on the edge of your seat, you're in the right place. Please subscribe and turn on the bell, because I'll be dropping another powerful story tomorrow. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thanks for being here. Now let's get started. Sonia M. Reeves had built her entire career on helping people tell their stories. As a brand strategist for emerging companies, she spent her days crafting narratives about growth, transformation, and beating the odds. She believed in the power of a good story because she thought she was living one herself. For 2 years, she'd been writing her own fairy tale with Michael S. Hilton, the heir to a commercial real estate empire who'd pursued her relentlessly after they met at a charity auction. He'd been magnetic that night. Confident, articulate, always knowing exactly what to say. He made her feel like she'd finally arrived, like all her years of hard work and hustle had led to this. A man who could offer her the world. Tonight was supposed to be the beginning of everything. The garden party at the Hilton estate was more than just a celebration. It was Sonia's formal introduction to Michael's circle, the moment she'd officially become part of the world she'd spent years trying to enter. She'd chosen her dress carefully, a stunning emerald green that Michael had said made her look like old money. She'd taken it as a compliment. Michael's family had never exactly embraced her. There were always those calculated pauses, the questions about where exactly she grew up, the way conversations about our kind of people seemed to exclude her specifically. But Michael had always dismissed her concerns. They'll come around, he'd say. You just need to prove you belong. So she'd spent months proving. Attending the right events, laughing at the right jokes, making herself smaller and more palatable. Tonight was supposed to be her reward. Sonia arrived at the estate as the sun began its golden descent, painting the manicured grounds in warm light. Guests were already scattered across the lawn, women in designer dresses, men in tailored blazers, everyone holding crystal champagne flutes that caught the light. It should have been beautiful. It should have felt like winning. She spotted Michael near the rose garden, standing close to someone in an intimate posture that made her stomach tighten. She told herself she was being paranoid. He'd been distant lately, distracted, but he'd blamed it on work stress. Big deals closing, he'd explained. Once this quarter ends, everything will be different. Sonia made her way across the lawn, her heels sinking slightly into the perfect grass. As she got closer, she could see the woman more clearly. Designer dress, confident posture, the kind of woman who looked like she'd been born into this world rather than clawing her way in. That's when she saw it. Michael's hand on the woman's waist. His mouth near her ear, whispering something that made her laugh. And then, as Sonia stood frozen 10 feet away, he kissed her. Not a friendly peck. A real kiss, the kind that erased any possible innocent explanation. The world narrowed to that single moment. The champagne glass she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, hitting the stone pathway with a sharp crack that cut through the ambient conversation. Michael and the woman broke apart. His eyes met Sonia's, and what she saw there wasn't shock or guilt, it was irritation. Like she'd interrupted something inconvenient. Sonia. His voice was flat, almost bored. We need to talk. She couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The woman beside him had the audacity to smile. A small, satisfied curve of her lips that said everything about how little Sonia had ever mattered. This is Victoria, Michael said, as casually as if he were introducing a business associate. We've been seeing each other for about 6 months. I was going to tell you after tonight. I didn't want to make a scene before the party. 6 months. 6 months of planning a future while he was building one with someone else. You were going to tell me? Sonia's voice came out strangled, barely recognizable as her own. Michael sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Look, you're smart, you're ambitious. I genuinely liked you. But let's be honest, Sonia. You were always going to be temporary. Victoria is. He gestured vaguely at the woman beside him. Appropriate. Her family, her background. She understands this world in a way you never quite did. The cruelty of it landed like a physical blow. All around them, guests were beginning to notice the confrontation. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Someone's laughter rang out, oblivious and harsh. You don't belong here, Michael continued, his tone almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. You never did. I thought maybe you could learn, adapt, but some things you can't teach. This, he gestured at the estate, at the guests, at the life she'd thought was becoming hers, was never meant for people like you. Sonia felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart breaking. That was too clean, too poetic. This was uglier. This was the sound of her dignity shattering in front of 100 witnesses who would dine out on this story for months. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. Her throat had closed completely, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall in front of him. She turned on her heel and ran, her elegant dress flowing behind her as she fled down the garden path. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get away from the party, from the stairs, from the humiliation burning through every nerve in her body. Her heel caught on the edge of a stone, and she stumbled, catching herself on a low garden wall. The sobs came then, wrenching and raw, the kind of crying that felt like it might tear her apart. 2 years of her life. 2 years of bending herself into shapes she thought he wanted. And he'd been planning to discard her all along, like she was on a trial run before the real thing. The fountain's quieter. Less chance of the party photographers finding you. Sonia's head snapped up. A man stood a few feet away on the path. Tall, with kind eyes and an expression of genuine concern that felt almost foreign after Michael's cold dismissal. He looked vaguely familiar, something about the bone structure and the way he carried himself. I'm James, he said quietly, not moving closer. James Smith. Michael's friend, though I'm starting to question why I've tolerated that friendship for so long. He pulled a crisp handkerchief from his pocket and held it out to her, maintaining a respectful distance. I saw what happened back there. I'm sorry. He's always been cruel, but that was unconscionable. Sonia took the handkerchief with shaking hands. She'd heard Michael mention James before, usually with a dismissive tone. Smith and his do-gooder tech projects, he'd say. Acts like making apps for non-profits makes him better than everyone else. James settled onto the garden wall beside her, but not too close, giving her space to breathe. I've known Michael since university. He's always been like this, ruthless when it serves him, charming when it doesn't. I kept hoping he'd grow out of it. His voice was quiet but steady. I was obviously wrong. There was something about his genuine anger, his visible disgust at what Michael had done, that made Sonia's tears flow harder. Because it meant she wasn't crazy. It meant what happened was as devastating as it felt. His whole circle is like this, James continued, his voice low. They've built their lives on status and performance. I came from the same world, but I wanted no part of it. That's why I left and built my own company. One that actually creates value instead of just extracting it from others. I don't even know where to go, Sonia whispered, the full reality of her situation crashing over her. I gave up my apartment 8 months ago. We were living together. Everything I own is in his penthouse. James didn't hesitate. You're not going back there tonight. I have a guest residence on my property. It's fully furnished, private. It's yours for as long as you need it. No strings, no expectations. Sonia looked at him sharply, suspicion warring with desperation. She'd just been brutally reminded that wealthy men didn't do things out of kindness. There was always an angle. I know what it's like to be told you don't measure up to someone's arbitrary standards, James said quietly, meeting her eyes. To be dismissed by people who value wealth over character. Let me help you, just for tonight. Tomorrow you can figure out your next steps. But tonight, let me give you somewhere safe to fall apart. From the main lawn, the party sounds grew louder. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Michael was probably in there right now, charming everyone, standing beside Victoria as if Sonia had never existed at all. The thought of going back to that penthouse, of collecting her things under Michael's smug gaze, made Sonia feel physically ill. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." They left through a side gate, away from the party and the witnesses. James's car was parked on a quiet street, and he drove in comfortable silence, not forcing conversation, just letting her exist in her grief as the city lights blurred past the window. James's estate was nothing like the Hilton property. Where Michael's world was all cold marble and imposing architecture designed to intimidate, James's home was warm and welcoming. The main house glowed with soft light, and even in the darkness, she could see that the grounds felt organic rather than manicured. The guest house sat at the back of the property, connected by a stone pathway through gardens that felt peaceful rather than performative. Inside, it was beautifully appointed, not in a show-off way, but in a way that suggested someone had actually thought about comfort. Art hung on warm walls, books lined low shelves, and everything felt lived in and real. "There's food stocked in the kitchen, fresh linens on the bed," James said, handing her the key. "Take whatever time you need. I'll check in tomorrow if you'd like, but otherwise, you have complete privacy." Sonia nodded, unable to form words past the knot in her throat. James offered her a small, sad smile and walked back toward the main house, leaving her alone with the wreckage of the life she'd thought was hers. The next few days passed in a blur of tears and numbness. Sonia couldn't bring herself to look at the dozens of calls and texts flooding her phone, from Michael's assistant asking about her things, from acquaintances who'd been at the party wanting details, from people who'd never cared about her suddenly interested in her humiliation. James kept his word, giving her space but leaving thoughtful gestures. Fresh coffee and pastries appeared outside her door each morning. A note with the Wi-Fi password. Groceries quietly restocked without her having to ask. On the 5th day, Sonia finally emerged from the guest house and found James on his back patio, reading the newspaper with a cup of coffee. He looked up and smiled, not pitying, not probing, just genuinely pleased to see her. "Morning," he said simply. "Coffee." That became their routine. Coffee in the mornings, easy conversation that never pushed, never pried. Sonia learned that James ran a tech company that created affordable software for community organizations and small nonprofits. He spent his Saturdays volunteering at youth centers, teaching coding to kids from underserved neighborhoods. He'd quietly funded scholarship programs that had sent dozens of those kids to college. "Michael used to mock me for it," James told her one morning, his voice thoughtful rather than bitter. He said compassion was weakness, that giving money away without expecting returns was naive. He couldn't understand building something that actually helped people instead of just extracting value from them. "But you built something remarkable," Sonia said, having looked up his company the night before. "You proved him wrong." "I built something I'm proud of," James corrected gently. "That's different than proving anyone wrong. The Hilton Circle measures success in acquisitions and social status. I measure it in whether I can sleep at night knowing I've done some good in the world." As the weeks passed, Sonia started to rebuild. She relaunched her consulting business, reached out to former clients, and began booking new projects. James connected her with colleagues who needed brand strategy work, never asking for anything in return, just quietly supporting her without making it transactional. And somewhere in those quiet mornings and easy conversations, something shifted. Sonia noticed the way James's face lit up when she laughed at his terrible jokes. The way he listened, really listened, when she talked about her work, asking thoughtful questions rather than waiting for his turn to speak. The way his presence felt safe in a way she'd never experienced before, like she could be exactly who she was without performing or proving anything. She noticed, too, the way he looked at her sometimes, with something deeper than friendship, but patient, like he'd wait forever if that's what she needed. For the first time in her life, Sonia felt like she might be exactly where she belonged. Sonia had once believed the Hilton estate was the most beautiful place she'd ever seen. The first time Michael brought her here, she'd been breathless at the sight of it. All that pristine marble and perfectly symmetrical architecture, the grounds so immaculate they looked like a painting. "This could be yours," he'd whispered in her ear, and she'd felt like Cinderella at the ball. 2 years later, she saw it differently. The beauty was still there, but it felt cold now, designed to impress rather than welcome. The estate wasn't a home, It was a monument to wealth, every corner calculated to remind you of your place in the hierarchy. She felt it most acutely at gatherings like tonight's garden party. The way Michael's mother would greet her with that tight smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Sonia, darling, that dress is interesting. Is it vintage?" The question delivered like a compliment but landed like a blade. The way conversations would shift when she approached topics changing from family vacation homes in the Hamptons to something more accessible, more generic, as if she needed protection from their world. Michael always told her she was being too sensitive. "They're just getting to know you," he'd say. "You need to try harder, make them see what I see." So she tried. She studied their references, laughed at jokes she didn't quite understand, made herself smaller and quieter at dinners where everyone seemed to speak a language she'd never quite mastered. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, Michael had promised, would be her moment to finally belong. The garden party was her official introduction to his wider circle, the moment when she'd stop being the girlfriend and become part of the family. She'd spent weeks preparing, choosing every detail carefully, desperate to get it right. As she stood at the entrance to the estate, watching guests already scattered across the manicured lawn with their crystal champagne flutes catching the golden evening light, Sonia felt that familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. She was still trying so hard to fit into a world that had never wanted her at all. Sonia made her way across the lawn, her heels sinking into the perfect grass with each step. She was looking for Michael, wanting that quiet moment before the evening swallowed them both into performance and pleasantries. Someone had mentioned seeing him near the rose garden, so she followed the stone pathway, weaving between clusters of guests who barely glanced her way. That's when she saw him. Michael, standing close to a woman in a designer dress that probably cost more than Sonia's monthly rent. Too close. His hand rested on the woman's waist with casual ownership, his mouth near her ear, whispering something that made her laugh, that intimate, knowing laugh that sent ice through Sonia's veins. Then he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, but a real kiss, the kind that erased any possible innocent explanation. The champagne glass slipped from Sonia's fingers, shattering against the stone with a sharp crack that cut through the ambient chatter. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Michael and the woman broke apart, and when his eyes met hers, there was no shock, no guilt, only irritation, like she'd interrupted something inconvenient. "Sonia." His voice was flat. "We need to talk." She couldn't speak. The woman beside him smiled, a small, satisfied curve of lips that said everything. "This is Victoria," Michael said casually, as if introducing a colleague. "We've been together for 6 months. I was going to tell you after tonight. I didn't want to make a scene." 6 months. 6 months of lies while she planned a future that never existed. "You don't belong here," Michael said, his tone almost gentle, which made it worse. "You never did. Victoria understands this world. You were always going to be temporary. Sonia. Surely you knew that." The humiliation hit like a wave. All around them, guests watched with barely concealed interest. Someone's laughter rang out, oblivious and sharp. Sonia turned and ran, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall in front of them. She didn't know where she was going. She just followed the winding garden paths, past perfectly manicured hedges and flower beds that looked too perfect to be real. Her heel caught on the edge of a stone, and she stumbled, catching herself against a low wall. The sobs came then, wrenching and raw, the kind of crying that felt like it might physically tear her apart. She collapsed onto a hidden bench tucked behind a rose arbor, away from the party's line of sight. 2 years of her life. 2 years of bending herself into shape she thought he wanted, and he'd been planning to discard her all along. She'd given up her apartment, her independence, her sense of self, all for a man who saw her as temporary from the very beginning. The fountains quieter. Less chance of the party photographers finding you. Sonia's head snapped up. A man stood a few feet away on the path. Tall, with kind eyes and an expression of genuine concern that felt almost foreign after Michael's cold dismissal. He looked vaguely familiar, something about the way he carried himself, but she couldn't place him through her tears. "I'm James," he said quietly, not moving closer, maintaining a respectful distance that felt deliberate. "James Smith. Michael's friend, though after what I just witnessed, I'm questioning why I've tolerated that friendship for so long. He pulled a crisp handkerchief from his pocket and held it out to her. I saw what happened back there. I'm sorry. He's always been cruel, but that was unconscionable. Sonia took the handkerchief with shaking hands, unable to form words. James settled onto the bench beside her, but not too close, giving her space to breathe. I've known Michael since university. He's always been ruthless when it serves him, charming when it doesn't. His voice was steady, quiet with genuine anger. I kept hoping he'd grow out of it. Clearly I was wrong. There was something about his visible disgust at Michael's actions that made Sonia cry harder, because it meant she wasn't crazy. It meant what happened was as devastating as it felt. His whole circle is like this, James continued, his voice low and steady. They've built their lives on status and performance, on making sure everyone knows their place in the hierarchy. I came from the same world, but I wanted no part of it. That's why I built my own company, my own life, one that values substance over status. The reality of her situation crashed over Sonia like a wave. I don't even know where to go, she whispered, her voice breaking. I gave up my apartment 8 months ago. We were living together in his penthouse. Everything I own is there with him. She had no home, no safe place to fall apart. The thought of going back to that cold marble penthouse, of facing Michael's smug indifference while she packed her things, made her feel physically ill. James didn't hesitate. You're not going back there tonight. I have a guest house on my property. It's private, fully furnished, completely separate from the main residence. It's yours for as long as you need it. No strings attached, no expectations. Sonia looked at him sharply, suspicion warring with desperation. She'd just been brutally reminded that wealthy men didn't do things out of kindness. There was always an angle, always a price. I know what it's like to be told you don't measure up to someone's arbitrary standards, James said quietly, meeting her eyes with an honesty that felt almost painful. To be dismissed by people who value wealth over character. Let me help you, just for tonight. Tomorrow you can figure out your next steps. But tonight, let me give you somewhere safe to fall apart. From the main lawn, the party sounds grew louder. Music, laughter, champagne glasses clinking. Michael was probably in there right now, standing beside Victoria as if Sonia had never existed. Okay, she whispered, her pride crumbling beneath the weight of her need. Thank you. They left through a side gate, away from the party and the witnesses. James's car was parked on a quiet street, and he drove in comfortable silence, not forcing conversation, just letting her exist in her grief as the city lights blurred past the window. The guest house was everything the Hilton estate wasn't: warm, welcoming, filled with art that seemed chosen for love rather than investment. James handed her the key, showed her the stocked kitchen and fresh linens, then left her alone with a simple, "Take all the time you need." The first 3 days passed in a blur of tears and numbness. Sonia couldn't bring herself to look at her phone, couldn't face the calls and texts that were undoubtedly piling up. She slept, cried, and moved through the rooms like a ghost, trying to piece together how her entire life had imploded in the span of 20 minutes. James never intruded, but his presence was felt in small, thoughtful gestures. Fresh coffee and pastries appeared outside her door each morning. A note with the Wi-Fi password. Groceries quietly restocked without her having to ask. He gave her space to fall apart without making her feel abandoned in it. On the 5th morning, Sonia finally emerged from the guest house and found James on his back patio, reading with a cup of coffee. He looked up and smiled, not pitying, not probing, just genuinely pleased to see her. "Morning," he said simply. "Coffee." That became their routine. Morning coffee, easy conversation that never pushed. Sonia learned that James ran a tech company creating affordable software for nonprofits and community organizations. He spent Saturdays teaching coding to kids from underserved neighborhoods, and funded scholarship programs that sent dozens of them to college. "Michael used to mock me for it," James said one morning. Called compassion weakness, said giving without expecting returns was naive. "But you built something remarkable," Sonia said quietly. "I built something I'm proud of," James corrected gently. "That's all that matters." As the weeks passed, Sonia started to rebuild. She relaunched her consulting website, reaching out to former clients with a carefully worded explanation about her sudden unavailability. The responses were warmer than she'd expected. People actually cared about her work, not just her connection to Michael's world. James connected her with colleagues who needed brand strategy, never making it transactional, just quietly opening doors without fanfare. A non-profit founder here, a startup CEO there. Sonia's brilliant at narrative, he'd say simply, then step back and let her work speak for itself. She started noticing things about him. The way he actually listened when she talked about her projects, asking thoughtful questions instead of waiting for his turn to speak. His terrible jokes that somehow still made her laugh. The way he treated everyone with the same genuine respect. His housekeeper, his assistant, the teenager who delivered groceries. As if status meant nothing and character meant everything. One morning, she found him in the garden, dirt on his hands, replanting flowers that had been damaged in a storm. "I could hire someone," he said, catching her watching, "but I like doing it myself. Keeps me grounded, literally." His smile was self-deprecating, warm in a way that reached his eyes. It was so different from Michael's carefully curated charm. James didn't perform kindness. He simply was kind, in small, consistent ways that built trust like layers of paint. Sonia realized she'd started looking forward to their morning coffees, to the sound of his footsteps on the path, to the way his face lit up when she shared good news about a new client. It wasn't the intoxicating rush she'd felt with Michael. That had been performance and adrenaline. This was something quieter, steadier, like finding solid ground after years of walking on ice. She felt safe with him. Not just physically safe, but safe to be exactly who she was. No performing, no proving, no bending herself into acceptable shapes. And somewhere in that safety affection had taken root. Then Michael showed up. Sonia was working at the guest house when she heard the knock. Sharp, insistent, familiar. She opened the door to find him standing there, looking perfectly composed in his tailored suit, but with an edge of desperation in his eyes she'd never seen before. "Sonia, please. Just hear me out." His voice was soft, pleading. "I made a terrible mistake. The pressure of that world, my family's expectations, it made me weak. I chose what I thought I was supposed to want instead of what I actually wanted. You." She should have slammed the door. Instead, she stood frozen, hating how his words still had the power to reach something inside her. Victoria meant nothing. She was just what my mother wanted, what the family expected. But I can't stop thinking about you, about what we had. He took a step closer. "I was a coward, Sonia. But I'm here now, asking for another chance." For a moment, just a moment, she wavered. Then his expression shifted, hardened into something calculating. "Though I have to ask," Michael said, his tone changing, "what's really going on with you and James? You don't actually think his rescue act was genuine, do you?" He laughed, sharp and cold. "James has always resented me. This is just his way of getting back at me. Taking something I had, playing the hero. It's a billionaire power play. Sonia. You're a pawn in whatever game he's running." The words hit like poison, spreading through her chest. "You're wrong." "Am I?" He swoops in at the exact moment you're vulnerable, offers you his guest house, his connections, his kindness. Michael's smile was cruel. "Men like James don't do anything without an angle. You're just too naive to see it." He left, and Sonia stood in the doorway, Michael's words echoing in her mind, doubt creeping in like frost. That night, she didn't go to the patio for coffee. For 3 days, Sonia avoided James, letting Michael's words fester in her mind. Every kindness James had shown her suddenly felt suspect. Was it real, or was she just a pawn in some wealthy man's game? She'd been fooled before. How could she trust her judgment now? She was at a coffee shop downtown, working on a client presentation, when a woman approached her table. "Sonia? I'm Rachel Chen. We met briefly at one of Michael's parties. I work in tech journalism." Sonia remembered her vaguely, nodded politely. "I heard you're working with James Smith now," Rachel continued. "That man is something else. Did you hear about the Harrison deal?" Sonia's stomach tightened. "No." He walked away from it last month. Would have been worth $40 million to his company. A massive partnership with Harrison Industries to develop tracking software for their supply chain operations. James was 3 signatures away from closing it. Rachel shook her head in admiration. Then he found out Harrison was planning to use the software to monitor factory workers in Bangladesh, trying to squeeze more productivity out of people already working in terrible conditions. James killed the entire deal. Just walked away. The coffee shop noise faded to white static. His board was furious, Rachel said. But James told them if they wanted a company that valued profit over people, they could find another CEO. I covered the story. It was extraordinary. Most executives would have taken the money and looked the other way. But James. She smiled. He's the real deal. After Rachel left, Sonia sat frozen, her laptop screen blurring before her eyes. $40 million. James had forfeited $40 million rather than compromise his principles, rather than profit from exploitation. Michael's words crumbled to dust. James hadn't helped her to get back at Michael. He'd helped her because that's who he was. Someone who chose integrity over profit, compassion over status, every single time. Even when it cost him everything. She'd doubted him. She'd pulled away, let Michael's poison infect something good and real. She drove to James's office building, her heart pounding, terrified she'd ruined everything. The receptionist tried to stop her. He's in a board meeting. But Sonia was already pushing through the conference room doors. James looked up from the head of the table, surrounded by executives in expensive suits. Surprise flickered across his face. Then concern. Sonia. I'm sorry, she said, breathless, not caring about the dozen pairs of eyes watching. I'm sorry I doubted you. Michael came by and he made me question everything, made me think you were playing some game. And I was so scared of being used again that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. James stood slowly, his expression unreadable. But you're not him. You've never been like him. Her voice cracked. You walked away from $40 million because it would have hurt people. You built your entire life around integrity and compassion. And when you found me broken in that garden, you didn't see an opportunity or a pawn. You just saw someone who needed help. The room was completely silent. I've been falling for you, Sonia continued, tears streaming down her face. For weeks, maybe longer. The way you listen, the way you care about things that matter, the way you make me feel like I'm enough exactly as I am. And I'm terrified because I don't know if I've ruined this by pulling away, by letting doubt win. But I had to tell you. I had to. James crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was certain, like something that had been building for months finally breaking free. When he pulled back, his hands framed her face, his eyes bright with emotion. I chose you, he said quietly. Every single day from the moment I saw you in that garden. Not to spite Michael. Not as some game. Because you're extraordinary, Sonia. And I've been waiting for you to see it too. I see it now, she whispered. I see us. Around them, the board members were quietly filing out, but neither of them noticed. They were already building something new. A future based on trust, integrity, and a love that had grown from the wreckage of everything Sonia thought she wanted. She'd finally found where she belonged. This is the end of the story. I believe you learn 1 or 2 things. Please, if you have not subscribed, kindly do so. You are so precious to me. For more engaging stories, check the video on the screen. You don't want to miss this particular one.